I would argue the West has already lost its hegemony. We haven't lost our supremacy, but the hegemony is gone. The it or the bang is when everyone in a coordinated fashion realizes that what has been done slowly and methodically is inevitable and we need to get out of dollars now. But the all-at-once moment, when the collective awareness of the world realizes this is a trend that is happening and that we are moving away from a country that is immeasurably indebted, we will never pay this off. We will either inflate, we will default, or we will find a villain. And I think they've chosen what's behind door number 3, to find a villain. To me, the big picture is exactly what Zoltan Pozsar says. It's a system that's all about commodities. I think gold will outperform just about everyone's expectations because it will be the cornerstone to inspiring trust in whatever new system arises.
If President Trump does win, he has said that he would tackle this. He has addressed this issue. He has expressed strong opposition to countries moving away from the dollar. He understands how important it is. He has compared it to losing a revolutionary war. Can this be reversed? Do you see perhaps a conflict, a war, as a way of fighting back for this reserve currency, reserve asset status?
On the Spot with Michelle Makori is brought to you by Swan Bitcoin.
Previously in part 1 of this interview.
In a major shift, Saudi Arabia has let the Petrodollar agreement expire, opting to sell oil in multiple currencies instead of exclusively using the US dollar. The agreement of the past 50 years expired on June 9th. Now, the so-called Petrodollar deal reportedly stipulated that Saudi Arabia would price its oil exports exclusively in US dollars and invest its surplus oil revenues in US Treasury bonds. In exchange, the US would provide military support and protection to the kingdom. This helped the US dollar cement its position as the world's reserve currency and ushered in an era of American prosperity. So Saudi Arabia, now looking to move beyond an exclusive relationship with the US, marks a significant change in global economic dynamics and could have far-reaching implications for the US dollar's dominance.
The theory really would be that as those dollars, there are way more dollars outside the US than are inside the US because of the stockpiling to buy oil for 50 years. And as those dollars come home and are sold back to the issuer, because no one wants to hold them anymore. Now, it hasn't turned out into a full-fledged dumping, which I could see it turning into that at some point. But there still is demand for the dollar, as you mentioned, still does represent 58% of global reserves. And there is dollar-denominated debt that needs to be paid off. But little by little by little, I call it logarithmic decay. Little by little by little by little, it starts to chip away as those dollars are there's no longer a necessity to hold them. And as those dollars start to come home, inflation rates would go higher and higher and higher and higher. And heaven forbid it's a dumping. There's something out there called Project Sandman that basically says there's a whole group of 150, 175 countries that have agreed to do just that, to dump dollars in treasuries at a predetermined time. The question is it orderly or is it chaotic? But as those dollars come home, the level of inflation rises as those currency units are added to the currency base here, which would then raise interest rates. And when that happens, that's when you start to get into problems where as rates rise, things that in this country that make people feel wealthy, their stock holdings, their bond holdings, their real estate holdings, and the money held in the bank are all inversely correlated to that moment. And the over-leveraging of the banks in particular is a real big problem here. But if you think about it, if this happened all at once, if it was all at once, it would be catastrophic. They're putting it together and doing it the right way, methodically, regimented. And when they say now, it'll be a religious experience because that's when you would see the dumping, a massive dumping. Yes, it is a big deal, regardless of what they are telling you about the petrodollar deal being a nothing burger. It is not a nothing burger.
So, Andy, you're saying regardless, the era of fiat currency is done. And again, fiat means by decree, Latin for by decree, and essentially currencies, backed by nothing. What is the timeline? And I always ask you this, and it seems to accelerate every time we speak. But you see, what is the ultimate fate of the dollar that you're seeing here, and under what timeline? Play that out for us.
Michelle, I see things, some things have seen clearly. None of it ever comes with a time frame. In a world of probabilities, I think there's a high probability that this happens. I don't know the time frame, but it is accelerating tremendously. I wish I could answer that question. It would be nothing but a guess. Here, I'll show you. I had a painting commission that says it all. I don't know if you can see it. See that? Little by little, then all at once. Right. That is my take on things. Sorry. That is my take on things. It's going to be little by little, then all at once. That's logarithmic decay. You can see the logarithmic decay in society, in our finances, the way the moral fabric of this country, the way we are viewed around the world, the loss of the petrodollar standard, the detreasurization, the weaponization, all of these things are happening little by little by little by little. Bang. When is that bang? Don't know. But look, I think people know that there's something wrong. And even if you can't articulate it, something's wrong. And I don't know how fast before it breaks, but I can tell you that you don't wait for it to break. You don't wait for your house to be on fire to pay your home insurance premium. And you don't wait until you're on death's door to do your life insurance. And it's one of these deals where I think you take a look at all of the facts and weigh them and say that this is a trend that appears to be gaining steam. And I mean, look, the few times that we've spoken, everything we've talked about seems to be happening and accelerating. I'm not a soothsayer. This is the only thing in my career that I've seen clearly. And it freaks me out because I had the courage in 2019 and 2020, and ever since in 3,000 YouTube videos, say this. And it's documented and it's happening, and it scares me. It does, because it scares me how fast it's happening. And I don't see the time when I think about it, and I don't see what happens after it happens. It's really weird.
What is the it, Andy? Just articulate as clearly as you can the bang. What does that mean? What does that mean for Americans?
The it or the bang is when everyone in a coordinated fashion realizes that what has been done slowly and methodically is inevitable, and we need to get out of dollars now. And when you realize that everything in this country that makes people feel wealthy is inversely correlated to a spike in interest rates. And it allows us to have a villain. That villain is Xi Jinping and Putin and OPEC. How could they do it to us? That all at once moment, which starts out where the insiders know what's happening. And that's why you see this little by little part, that's where the people blow it off as inconsequential and a nothing burger, and it will never happen. Could never happen here, right? Look at all the things that have happened in the last 3 years that could never happen here. Well, these people, because of its slow, methodical pace, this little by little, they could never think it could happen here, and they blow it off and poo-poo it. But the all-at-once moment, when the collective awareness of the world realizes this is a trend that is happening and that we are moving away from a country that is immeasurably indebted, over 200 million, a trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. We will never pay this off. We will either inflate, we will default, or we will find a villain. And I think they've chosen what's behind door number 3, to find a villain, to incentivize. And we've talked about Jared Bernstein before, a man, the lead economic advisor, this knucklehead, he's the lead guy who's just talking into Biden's ear, telling him what to do. He wants to lose the reserve status. Well, what better way to do it than to weaponize the dollar and go sign an executive order to go green, allow the coalition of all these countries to find safety in numbers, and then let the country fall apart back at home. When you talk about the realization that this is real, and people then go from, wow, it's not a nothing burger, and run, that's when it becomes real. I don't know when that is. When is the collective realization? Could be next week. Could be 3 years from now. I don't know. But the inevitability of it, to me, is that we are watching a shift of natural resources and of power move from the West to the East. And at some point, that will become, I think, evident to the masses. When that happens, that's the it. And that's when it happens. Just like that's the all at once when you go over the waterfall.
I appreciate that interactive camera work there, by the way, Andy,
Thank
showing
you.
us
Thank you.
your artwork and an insight into your office.
Thank
And
you.
again, a reminder to our viewers, Jared Bernstein, the chairman of President Biden's Council of Economic Advisors, and he penned an op-ed in the New York Times back in 2014 titled Dethrone King Dollar. And in it, Bernstein wrote that new research reveals that was once a privilege is now a burden. And to get the American economy back on track, the government needs to drop its commitment to maintaining the dollar's reserve currency status. And then back in 2018, Bernstein wrote another op-ed in the Washington Post stating that if one consequence of the Trump era is that the dollar loses some degree of its reserve status, I will consider that a good thing. So, people within the Biden administration saying that they want this sort of leads to one of the arguments you've made before, where you say that this is perhaps, by design, not even an accident.
Yeah, I think it's too stupid to be stupid. I do. I mean, you can't make it up. And that's why I want people to spend a few minutes researching the Cloward-Piven theory, because guess what? Jared Bernstein, as did President Obama, both went to Columbia University, where Cloward and Piven, a husband and wife, they were husband and wife professors. They present a plan to overwhelm the system with government spending and entitlement programs. Let me just read you 3 or 4 tenets of it. 1, it's as if they are purposely overwhelming the U.S. economy to create systemic failure, destroying capitalism and our country from within. Cloward and Piven specifically mentioned targeting America's largest cities for their colossal welfare push. The primary objective of the strategy is to create chaos with the hopes of destroying America's capitalistic economy and replacing it with a socialist system that includes guaranteed incomes. A massive drive to recruit the poor onto the welfare rolls. The point of surging welfare claims is to enroll as many individuals as it takes to send the United States into an economic crisis. Well, think of 17 million people in here. Cloward and Piven reveal the best way to achieve their goals is to create a new loyal voting bloc out of the rapidly increasing number of welfare recipients. By delivering millions of dollars in cash benefits to the masses, expecting the masses will deliver their loyalty to their benefactors, develop an army of loyal serfs who will work to destroy America, whether knowingly or unknowingly. All these illegal immigrant children will be added to the welfare rolls and can be counted on to vote for larger government. Furthermore, both Cloward and Piven agreed that the mainstream media would play a critical role in their organized attack against America. To quote Cloward and Piven, as the crisis develops, it will be important to use the mass media to inform the broader liberal community about the inefficiencies and injustices of welfare. Now think about all of this stuff and ask yourself, is it possible that this is what they are actually trying to do? I mean, Obama went there, as did let's see, Bill Barr, Eric Holder, Madeleine Albright, Jared Bernstein. They all went there in the 60s, and Cloward and Piven were teaching. Now, I don't know if they learned from them or after them, but this was a tenet that was taught at Columbia. Now, I mean, fine line between conspiracy and reality, but when you read that and think about it, they are overwhelming the inner cities. They are overwhelming the entitlement system. The left-leaning media doesn't do a bad job. They do no job of telling us what's going on except create divisiveness. And all of this stuff, you can't make it up. Is it too stupid to be stupid? Did we really let all these people into our country? Is our electoral system fair? Do people go up to bed at night after the votes start getting tabulated in November and wonder, are they going to wake up to something different? Is the justice system deploying equally, the justice equally, or is there two-tiered? All of these things you start to wonder, and then look at what's happening to the inner cities and ask yourself, is it too stupid to be stupid, or is it not? Could it be planned? Is this the foundation to incentivize the world, like via the Operation Sandman, dump the dollars in the treasuries, create a massive surge of inflation, interest rates spike to the moon, and everything resets? Dollars, the banks, the insurance companies, the stock market, the bond market, everything. But have no fear, because guess who's here? Lael Brainerd, the number 2 at the U.S. government for economic policy. She worked at the Treasury. She worked under Powell at the Fed. And if somehow this current administration keeps power, she will lead the Fed. And she was number 2 under Powell. And she is a modern monetary theorist. She developed the CBDC while at the Fed with MIT, she ran point for Fed Now, which came out 6 months ago, which is Venmo on steroids backed by the Fed. This is what she wants. Culling of all the banks, a central bank issued digital currency, print, start over. And the interesting thing, Michelle, that I don't think we've talked about is look at the unfunded liabilities. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, government, military pensions. Who's that owed to? That's us. How about all the treasuries? Who's been selling them? Oh yeah, that's all them. Who's been buying them? Oh yeah, that's all us. The hedge funds, the money markets, mutual funds, and every one of us chasing yield, leaving the banks, buying treasuries. So it's a whole hell of a lot easier to default on us, where only, 20-25% of the debt is owed to them. It's all owed to us. We are so sorry this happened. Michelle, just sign on the dotted line. We know you lost everything. Take the CBDC, will make you whole. And this is all about pride and nationalism and patriotism because they did this to us. So when you talk about, do we fall on the sword and default? Do we inflate, which leads to default? Or do we just find a villain? And that's why when I'm giving a talk next month at Rick Rule's conference here in Boca, I was bummed to hear you won't be there. But I know your company will be there, but you won't. The title of my first speech was going to be "It's Too Stupid to Be Stupid," but now it's something a little bit more political. It's the same thing. Could we really be that foolish to think all of these things that we've done around the globe and at home won't have consequences? Or are the people not that stupid and really realizing this is how you get to option 3, and that is to find a villain that will make people universally accept a CBDC when the dollar gets forsaken. Now, I don't know if that happens or not. Everything I said up until that point is factual, but right. I guess you just have to let your mind wander a little bit.
Everything that you've said, has played out. And, our viewers know that nothing keeps me up at night more than worrying about a central bank digital currency. A reminder to our viewers, a form of fiat issued by a country's central bank, which is on the blockchain, or some kind of blockchain. So there's no privacy, there's no anonymity. That's completely obliterated. And most problematic is that it's programmable, meaning they can decide when that currency works or doesn't work. And they decide what transactions will be allowed. And it could also fine-tune monetary policy and just sort of inject money back into the system or suck money out of the system with a click.
About that. You're right. That's one of the tenets of it. But that's why you have to have an event that make people who are smart like you and the people who listen to you be willing to take it. Because if I were betting man, I'd say you'd never take it if you had your choice.
Or have no choice, right? Wipe out the system and then say, well, you can't use this anymore, but here's your digital wallet with a CBDC, and you have no choice but to do that. I want to focus on perhaps what could derail this. And you mentioned the elections. President Trump has been very vocal against a CBDC, for one thing. Some have also argued that this would not have happened under President Trump, although arguably the debt issue long precedes the Trump administration. But some would say that part of the weakness of the Biden administration, coupled with a relationship with the Saudis, coupled with the Afghanistan withdrawal, sort of accelerated this whole process. The question, though, is, can this be reversed? If Trump somehow wins the election, and many have questioned the integrity of that process and of our justice system, as you've just kind of touched on, but we won't unpack that in too much detail. But let's just say if President Trump does win, he has said that he would tackle this. He has addressed this issue. He has expressed strong opposition to countries moving away from the dollar. He understands how important it is. He has compared it to losing a revolutionary war. In fact, in March, he told CNBC that he would just not allow countries to go off the dollar because losing that standard would be like losing a revolutionary war. That'll be a major hit to the U.S. Let's quickly play that Trump soundbite from then and get your thoughts on the other side.
I hate when countries go off the dollar. I would not allow countries to go off the dollar because when we lose that standard, that will be like losing a revolutionary war. That will be a hit to our country, just like losing a war. And we can't let that happen. And too many countries now are fighting to get off the dollar.
So, Andy, President Trump gets the picture that you're painting. He gets that this is really going to hurt the American economy, America's standing on the world stage, and Americans living day to day, trying to pay for the grocery bills. That's going to become a heck of a lot worse. Let's assume somehow President Trump wins the election, right? Is there anything that can be done at this stage, even if that means going to war? What can be done?
He is a smart man, and he, say what you want about his sometimes buffoonery, the way he would speak. I would take his policies any day over the current administration, and God help us if he doesn't win. It would just be my personal decision or opinion. But I don't like, here again, the continuation of sanctions and threats. And, he's talking about sanctioning countries who would join the BRICS or would not use the dollar. And he's talking about a massive devaluation of the dollar, choosing inflation, lowering rates and inflating and devaluing the dollar. What that just means, it's easier to pay off our mountain of debt. He may keep the ball up in the air a little bit longer, and he may inspire concern and fear by some of our foes who are not afraid at all of the current administration, and he may make things better. I don't know if we've crossed that Rubicon, Michelle. Part of me feels like we have. And I wish I wasn't so concerned about, the fairness of the election process. And indeed, if we will wake up again to another questioning of the electoral system, either way you look at it, let's just say he wins. I say we have a better chance of pulling out of this nosedive. Look, Americans have done the best with their back against the wall. The one thing that we need that I don't know that either candidate is capable of doing is inspiring unity in this country. We need to be united in order to pull ourselves up. We need to all be Americans, regardless of where we've come from. And the Biden administration has done an amazing job at fostering a lack of unity and resentment, and at least in my opinion. So can he fix it? Look, if he goes around the world imposing sanctions again and all of these kinds of things that we've been doing for a very long time, I would say the chances are no. But if we can go around the world and do things in a more cooperative fashion and show the value of the American spirit and American ingenuity, and it'd be great to have some American manufacturing and all of these things that once made this country the beacon of everything: liberty, justice, freedom, all of the things that I talked about that seem to be kind of fading away, then no. So I guess we'll have to see. But I will tell you that we have zero chance if the Democratic Party stays in office, and a better chance of at least pulling out of this nosedive if Trump wins. But even his policy of massive dollar devaluation and of weaponization, or again, sanctions, if people do leave us, well, they're leaving you for a reason. And instead of sanctioning them and locking the door and going to bed without dinner, you might as well find an incentive and show how we can benefit one another by staying together. And that's something that I hope is not, an ideal from an era gone by. I don't know. I really don't. I can't answer that. But to say we have a much better chance if he wins, that's for sure.
But okay, so you've got onshoring production, which has been a Trump administration policy. Arguably, we've even seen the Biden administration sort of catch wind to this right now. And I get your point that some in the Biden administration want this, have spoken that this is what they want to do, and it's easier to find a villain. But even within the Biden administration, even within the old school establishment, you would have to say that there are some that do not want to lose this privilege of being the global reserve currency, right? That not everybody wants to have this great reset, and that there are people within the American government, Republican or Democrat, that for the power that it represents would still like to keep the dollar on top.
I'd sure as hell like to hope so. Yeah, I would.
But so the option is, right, but we still have a problem, as we've said, that is accelerating, and that we've got this debt, that's just servicing this debt is costing the annual defense budget, if not more at this point. The expression is, when all else fails, they take you to war. Right. And if we remember how the dollar got the status, it was after World War II. Bretton Woods I was after the US helped the Allies win the war. We're currently seeing, proxy wars happening around the world. Russia, Ukraine being one of them. Do you see perhaps a conflict, a war, as a way of fighting back for this reserve currency, reserve asset status? For those Republican or Democrat that don't want this, could that be a way to reassert American dominance? And again, certainly not rooting for a war, but could that be a way?
I would sure as hell hope not. And here again, when you talk
but that
about
could change it, though. I mean, couldn't that change that if you have some massive war and the U.S. comes out on top, and then everybody starts to fear America again, and they rethink this? Again, assuming the U.S. comes out on top, and who knows, then they kind of go, well, better get back on Team Dollar.
Well, let me put it to you this way. I have a friend that I play golf with who is friends with President Trump and plays golf with him once a month. And we talked about it just the other day, and he said that these countries feared him. And he said they respected, but more they feared him. They feared what he would do. And, he would tell me stories about what he would say to President Xi if he invaded Taiwan, and the things he would say to North Korea, to Kim. And again, this is all, I'm hearing this, third party, but yeah, maybe. I mean, again, yes, I think it's what is needed for sure. We need to have strength. We need to show that, I think we need to go back to the American ideals, and that's, that's also part of the deal. But yes, I think we have a better chance if Trump is in the White House to forestall these things. But God help us if we get into a hot war with, a country like China or a country like Russia. I live in southern Florida here, and there are nuclear-powered submarines, Russian submarines, 60 miles away from me. Is that something I take comfort in? Hell no.
But Andy, what if Russia loses this war? Because even the Biden administration has become more aggressive in funding this conflict. And we can get into how this conflict started in the first place and whether the Biden administration provoked Putin into that. That's, again, a whole other conversation we don't have time for right now. But let's assume Russia loses this war somehow, right? It really starts to amp up and there's more of a Western alliance here. Does that make this process slow down, reconsider? Because as we said, Putin has been one of the biggest players in pushing the de-dollarization trend, in calling for a new system. Should Putin get taken out, Russia loses the war, does that change the equation?
You had all of the BRICS just refuse to sign this agreement about, trying to end the war. And because Russia wasn't at the table, you have half of the Southern Hemisphere, or those aligned with the BRICS, who are on the side of Russia in this deal. And if they lose the war, it will be because either NATO or the United States ramped up their interest in this, which can all lead to a very dark place. Michelle, I don't even want to think about going into a World War III with high-tech weaponry the way that it is, and hypersonic missiles and all of these things. Let's just really hope for the best and hope that doesn't happen. But yeah, I mean, that's what they've done. No question about it. And we're more guilty of that than anyone. And so could it happen? Sure, it could. Will it happen? Let's hope not. Let's hope that there's some decorum. What should be more frightening is letting 17 million people into this country, many of which are unvetted, who have ties to terrorist organizations, who think they're a martyr by doing awful things, and they don't worry about mutual annihilation. Right. And that's a bigger threat to me, is what happens to, have we been invaded? Are there terror cells here? The FBI seems to think so. And again, 5% of 17 million, that's a lot. You're 900,000 people. That's a lot of damage. To me, that's the real threat. I just read an article, and they'll admit to this, that every single day these Navy installations and military installations are being, you have all these Chinese nationals. I just read it in mainstream article last night that they have to turn away these Chinese nationals who are going and taking pictures of military installations, even in very rural areas, and say they're sightseeing. So, could there be a 1% chance that some of these people are not here for the right reasons? I don't know. I think you could do a lot of damage to this country without getting into a hot war just by simply letting these people in who want to have their way with this country and could do an awful lot of damage. Do we get into a hot war? God help us if we do. I hope not. I mean, I haven't put a lot of thought into that, simply to think that everyone wants to see their grandkids grow up, and let's hope that doesn't happen. But these fundamentalists who think they're being a martyr by doing these horrible things, you have to ask yourself, is it really wise to have an open border and let these people in when we are as polarizing as we are? That, to me, is more of a pressing issue.
Again, I'm just seeing what could potentially derail this playing out. And very quickly, Andy, I know we've touched on this before, but the other issue that could potentially prevent the BRICS from this coordinated, Operation Sandman, or even the gradual cooperation to dump the dollar, is discord within the BRICS, right? That maybe the more members you have, the harder it is to get agreement. That between, China and India, there's already some discord when it comes to coming up with some common currency. We've got Iran and Saudi Arabia in the BRICS, and despite some recent superficial agreements, they have a long-standing hostility. And basically the idea is, there isn't that much of an alliance between all these members. Maybe they've tried to do things before in the past, that's failed. Can they get it right if they're not all on the same page, and they may all be jostling for superiority within this organization? So as a counter to the BRICS is so united and will be able to get agreement, what do you say to that?
I think these are all good points and possibilities. My enemy's friend is my enemy's enemy is my friend.
Yeah.
Type of thing. It plays out. Yeah. I mean, sure. All of these are valid points. The progression still continues, where 59 countries want to join now. At some point, it has to be taken for real. But yeah, I mean, this is a big deal. This is a once in a generation shift. And either we find a way to inspire confidence and reunite unity, and pull up from this nosedive, or we don't. I guess only time will tell. But I think to ignore what has already happened is a mistake. And I think for people to say, yeah, these countries don't like or trust each other, but what's the alternative? Do they like and trust us? So what's the lesser of two evils? I don't know. But Michelle, all I can tell you is that for the first time in I don't know how many years, for the first time in at least in 50, 60, 70 years, there seems to be a challenger that's coming up in the ranks. And is it going to be legitimate? Will they have all it takes to challenge the West? We'll see. I would argue the West has already lost its hegemony. We haven't lost our supremacy, but the hegemony is gone. Now we'll see what happens with the supremacy. But to not prepare for it, to not even have it on your radar screen, as some of these chief financial analysts have, is just as big of a mistake as going all in on the BRICS. I think you have to legitimize it. Hope it doesn't materialize to the detriment of this country, but understand that it has the possibility to greatly upset the apple cart should it begin or continue to accentuate.
Right. Okay. So as we start to wrap up here, Andy, let's bring it back to two assets, and we'll start off with gold, because obviously this all hinges quite dramatically on gold, as we've discussed. Again, every time you spoke, you have correctly said that gold is going to continue to make new record highs. It has done so since we last spoke. It did hit another record high this year. What's your outlook on gold going into the end of 2024, and perhaps any kind of time horizon that you feel comfortable with?
Yeah, I would tell you that there's a very high probability that by the end of 2024, it's much higher. It will continue to make new highs. Yeah, gold will in terms of dollar highs. And look, I think it will go higher than anyone thinks possible. I'll put it to you that way. And in particular, if it will be pegged to a new system, whether it be BRICS or West, it will have to be much, much higher. It's funny, if you look at all of the central banks and their balance sheets, gold is held in an account by the name of the gold revaluation account. And you got the finance minister or the head of the Dutch National Bank who said we should revalue gold to get our balance sheet in order. That's what has happened here in the United States before, right over my shoulder. And would it happen again? I don't know. But I do believe the only thing that I can tell you out of 34 years in finance is that markets go higher to the upside than anyone ever thinks possible and fall to the downside more than anyone thinks possible. I think gold will outperform just about everyone's expectations because it will be the cornerstone to inspiring trust in whatever new system arises. So higher than anyone thinks possible. What is the time frame? Don't know. I don't see things in a short-term prism. I only look at the inevitability or the big picture. And to me, the big picture is exactly what Zoltan Pozsar says. It's a system that's all about commodities. And they're, because of the distortion on the exchanges that can rehypothecate and sell over and over and over and over and over again the same amount of contracts, we really don't even know what the real price of gold and silver should be. But it's a lot higher than it is right now. I know that. And I would bet that the next time we talk, it will be markedly higher than it is today.
So, Andy, many see the same scenario, the same concerns, the same things playing out on the world stage as you do, and have articulated it that way. But they see Bitcoin as the solution or part of the solution. They see Bitcoin as the reserve asset, the digital gold, truly decentralized, truly limited supply, or as part of this basket of commodities that the new block currency by the BRICS and others would, be pegged to. Where do you see Bitcoin in all of this?
Not as any type of reserve asset, because you'll never get the people in charge to allow a decentralized platform, to be. The central bank will not embrace a decentralized platform. I'm not a Bitcoin hater. I've been buying it. I had some interesting discussions with Mark Moss and Natalie Burnell in Vancouver last year, and they opened my eyes to, dipping my toe into the water. And I have been every few weeks. I've been adding a little bit of Bitcoin, and I think it's something where these two camps should be united and not divided. It should not be adversarial. We all see the same thing, and that is problems with the system. The difference is, it seems to me, the Bitcoin community is more inclined to make profits, whereas the gold community is more inclined to keep those profits. That's why there's such a beneficial union between the two, where they're complementary to one another. But I do not see it as playing the role of any central bank system. I don't see that at all. But I do think it has a validity to it, and I think it does have lasting sticking power, if you will. But in my heart, I want to be able to touch it and hold it and feel it. But I don't want to go through life saying, damn it, I knew I should have done that. And why didn't I do it? It was right there in front of me. I missed enough of its run already so that I'm okay just adding a little bit. But I don't see it. Look, all the central banks of the world own gold. They don't all own Bitcoin. I think it is an interesting proposition, but not one that I think will be part of any global system. But it could very well have very lasting power as an asset, and one that still probably has great potential. But I don't think the governments will embrace it.
Not embrace it again as part of this basket. I get not embrace it as the reserve asset, but if they're going for this basket,
yeah, why not? I mean, the finance minister Glaziev said it will be a basket of commodities. Now, I do believe it's viewed as personal property by the Fed. So, I mean, is that a commodity? I'm not sure, but I could see it as part of an asset class or part of a basket of things that have immutability and veracity. And that's exactly what it has, immutability and veracity. The one piece to it is the decentralization. And I don't know how that plays out, but I could see that. I guess we'll have to see. It wouldn't surprise me that if it were added to a small degree to a basket of those assets or commodities that back a new system. Anything that will inspire confidence. And, you talk to guys like Mark Moss or Natalie Burnell, they'll give you a million reasons why it should inspire confidence. And enough pushed me enough in the direction where I actually have gone out and been buying it and adding it. I've been buying gold and silver every 2 weeks for 34 years. I told you long ago that was the promise I made my dad when we started this company in 1989. But I've been adding since February of this year a little bit of Bitcoin every 2 weeks. so I don't have to punch myself in the ear somewhere down the road saying, why was I so, pig-headed and married to my own ideology? So I'm open-minded enough. Remember, my parents were hippies growing up, and so I'm okay. I'm open-minded to everything, lifestyle or differences of opinions. And that's one of the things that's missing in this country is we all have no time to listen to anyone else's opinion. And I thank Mark and Natalie for taking me to lunch and opening my eyes. And if we never listen to other opinions, we don't grow. And we learn more and more about less and less till we know everything about nothing. Do I think Bitcoin will replace gold? Hell no. But I do think that it has a role and a fair one in where we are right now. So yeah, maybe a small piece anyway to your point.
Well, we always appreciate your opinion, Mark Moss, Natalie Brunell. They've both been on Kitco News, and we always love hearing from them. Andy, final thoughts, because we love hearing from our viewers. We read the comments, and some of the pushback against you is like, well, he's just talking his book. He likes to generate fear. He's selling quote unquote fear porn because Andy is just talking his book because you ultimately sell gold and silver. So as a final thought, what do you say to those viewer comments?
Let me be honest on that one, and as poignant as it is, people who've said that have never owned a business. People have said that have never worked their ass off to do something and build something from scratch, and are so cynical that they think that being a good human being and trying to help your fellow man and woman, looking yourself in the mirror every night, when you meet your maker someday and what the hell did you do to help this world? They think that has to be mutually exclusive from running a business. And, my business has generated 10 billion in sales. I'm doing just fine. I don't need to be on these podcasts where I expose myself and my family to that type of stuff. And luckily I don't get that much of it, but that is always the common, well, if he likes it so much, why is he selling it? I mean, duh. It's just some of the questions are so dumb. But the point of it is that no one asked me that question, when I started this company from scratch before the internet. And I built this business for 34 years and never had a customer complaint by doing what you're supposed to do in this country. Build a good business, use the laws of capitalism and good intentions to build a good business. And when people say that, it aggravates me to no end, because no, I'm not talking my book, and it does not have to be mutually exclusive of one another. A good business and doing the right thing. And for those people who say that, they'll never believe me that that's my intention, but I promise you, as God is my witness, that is my intention. I feel like I'm contributing a little bit to the world. And if that means I get out here, and how much how much prep work goes into speaking to someone like you for an hour. It ain't easy, and you have to be prepared, and you have to study, and you have to research, and you have to be coherent, at least a little bit anyway. And I feel that it makes me happy to know that I'm trying, and I see my kids see how hard I work and how much passion I have in it. I've been buying gold and silver every 2 weeks for 34 years. That's how much I believe in it. And so, no, Michelle, I'm not talking my book, and running a business you'll never hear that from a business owner. And running a business and trying to do right by people do not have to be mutually exclusive. And that is the sadness of how cynical this world has become, where people feel that way. So to their point, I get it. I understand it, but it's not me. And I wish that the world was less cynical and more understanding, and actually think that people are meant to do good things, and be more cynical of people who were not doing good things. But anyways, I'll let that go. Just simply saying I love what I do and I try to do right. And that's why in 10 billion in sales, we've never had a customer complaint, ever. I've pissed people off, but I've made right by it. And I would never get on a channel and try and say things just to ring the cash register. That would be exposed and defrauded just like that.
Well, I certainly appreciate your contribution, and can certainly appreciate and acknowledge the fact that you're just trying to do right by everyone. So Andy,
it's true.
Again, thank you for doing right by me. I know I take a lot of your time, and I know I like to push back on you just to challenge the thesis, but it's always a pleasure chatting with you.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, even though what you say tends to scare me as it comes to fruition, but it's always a pleasure getting your insights, Andy.
It scares me, and I've told you this 3 times. I'll tell you again. You're the best in the business. I've never met anyone or been interviewed by anyone who asks the right questions and pushes back politely and makes me think. And I've watched other interviews you've done with other people, and I admire that. That shows that you're prepared and you understand and you've done your work and your due diligence. And it's my honor to be here, and you make me better and you make me think. And I would be honored to come back anytime. So thank you very much for your kind words. And I follow you from afar. So just know I'm a phone call away or a text away. Anytime you want me back, I'm happy to come back. And I think there's going to be a lot of stuff that happens between now and the end of the year. So hopefully between now and then we'll have a chance to chat. But in the meantime, I hope you and everyone else out there stays well, and look forward to picking up where we left off, hopefully not too far down the road.
Right. Well, we'll end on that note of mutual admiration. I know 2 of yours, by the way, that one of Andy's interviews is the top performing video on Kitco News, where we first laid out this whole thesis, and we'll be sure to drop a link to that interview in the description of this video. Andy, thank you so much. Appreciate it, as always.
You're the greatest, Michelle. Thank you, and you stay well.
Okay, thank you, Andy Schectman. And again, as we wrap up here, full disclosure, I do own both gold and Bitcoin. And on that note, I do want to say a special thanks to our sponsors, Swan Bitcoin. And a reminder to our viewers that Swan does offer an IRA product, which allows you to invest directly in Bitcoin with your IRA. There's a way to set it up that is super easy. You're basically buying Bitcoin on autopilot. It allows you to take advantage of dollar cost averaging as you accumulate Bitcoin into your IRA. And there is a link in the description with a special offer for Kitco viewers to help facilitate that process. So make sure to check that out. As always, thank you again for checking out this video. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. And as I just mentioned, we love to get your comments. We do read them. So feel free to praise, whine, or just opine. We'll see you next time. From me, Michelle Makori, and the rest of the Kitco team.
On the Spot with Michelle Makori is brought to you by Swan Bitcoin. Swan Bitcoin IRA. Your legacy, your way. Real Bitcoin, not proxies. Traditional and Roth IRAs. Fast, easy setup. Start now at swan.com/retire.